Welcome to SOHO's Penning the Past series. I'm Dean Glass, and I'm delighted to have you with us for another compelling presentation celebrating San Diego's rich and varied history. Today, we turn our attention to one of the city's most architecturally distinctive neighborhoods, Mission Hills. This area boasts beautifully preserved craftsman and Spanish colonial revival homes alongside many mid-century modern designs by influential architects. This mix, coupled with the area's walkability, mature trees, and charming winding streets, contributes to its unique character. We're honored to welcome historian and preservation advocate Janet O'Day, who will guide us through the remarkable people, events, and developments that shaped this elegant enclave. Janet is the co-author of Arcadia Publishing's Mission Hills, and was a founding member of Mission Hills Heritage, a neighborhood preservation group that has played a vital role in recognizing and protecting the area's historic character. She has written successful landmark nominations and organized popular historic walking, bike, and home tours that bring the past to life. From 2010 to 2021, she and her late husband, Alan Hazard, ran the oldest plumbing shop in San Diego County, right in the heart of Mission Hills. Janet's deep knowledge and passion for preservation promise to make this a fascinating hour. After the presentation, we'll have time for questions, so please put them in the chat feature. And now, please join me in welcoming Janet O'Day.
Welcome. Our program follows the chapters of the Mission Hills Images of America book that begins in the early 20th century. In 2011, Alan and I were approached by Arcadia, the publishers of to produce this book after they saw the Historic Hills Facebook page, but we didn't initially accept the project. By then, we knew a fair amount about Mission Hills. It was after we researched, wrote, and coordinated the Mission Hills Historic District and continued exploring the area and casually interviewing old-time residents. We conducted oral histories and collected stories and photos. We wrote historic designation reports for neighbors and friends. It all gave us a richer insight into our community's past. The publisher came back in 2014, and by then we saw that old-timers were moving or passing away. Houses were being remodeled or demolished, so we did not let the moment pass us by and started working on the book. We'll show some of the losses to the built environment and talk about people who may be almost forgotten, including some idiosyncrasies that make our neighborhood unusual. If you hear me say we, it's because Alan and I wrote this book together. We often worked together on projects. We purchased Powers Plumbing in 2010. I ran it, then recruited Alan to work with me in the office. We had put this presentation together for last year's Penning the Past, and it was ready to go. But a few weeks before the scheduled event, Alan suddenly passed away. So if you hear a pun, it's probably because Alan wrote that part, so just make sure to give him credit. Many former and current residents brought their old family photos into Powers Plumbing to be scanned. We visited with many people who generously gave us their time, images, and plans. Alan went to estate sales in search of old photographs and researched archives at local churches and schools, finding old images. We were very lucky that the vast majority of photos in our book came from private collections, revealing personal stories and images that were rarely seen before. So we're going to start with the highlights from the book. And of course, there were people who were here before our story begins. We're highlighting the events that were the result of what we mostly see within the Mission Hills community today, with some references to the backstory. So we begin with three seminal characters: Sarah Johnson Cox Miller, Kate Sessions, and George Marston. Sarah was the stepdaughter of Henry Johnston, who was the captain of the SS Orizaba, a wooden side-wheel steamer nicknamed the Mayflower of the West. In 1869, Captain Johnston bought 65 acres above San Diego Bay, which is now Mission Hills. In 1888, following his death, Sarah Miller filed a subdivision map for Johnston Heights on the property she inherited from the captain and built the Villa Orizaba in his honor. After that, the house was remodeled and moved so it no longer resembles this design you see on the right. About 1904, Kate Session moved her nursery from Balboa Park to West Lewis and Stevens Streets. A few years later, she worked with George Marston and George Cook when they were laying out the Mission Hills subdivision. In about 1907, she persuaded John D. Spreckels to extend the trolley line through Mission Hills. Sessions' timing was impeccable, as these efforts were about 2 years before the announcement of the 1915 Panama, California exposition that fueled a building boom. There is no quiz on all these dates, but they're in the book, so make sure to look them up because they all are interesting how they relate together. In 1905, George Marston brought the East Coast planner John Nolan to San Diego to create a city plan. Nolan criticized San Diego's street plans because they failed to live up to the potential that he saw. He recommended that main roads follow the natural topography instead of using a grid system, along with other suggestions. The civic leaders rejected Nolan's city plan twice. But in 1907, Marston and others, including Percy Goodwin, bought 60 acres of land adjacent to Johnston Heights and formed Mission Hills Company. They implemented key aspect of Nolan's city plan when mapping out the future Mission Hills subdivision. In 1907, George Marston also purchased the site of the first Alta California mission established by Spanish friar Junipero Serra and the Spanish soldiers who resided on Presidio Hill. Now the park serves as the western entry into Mission Hills. With all the good Marston did for San Diego, he felt that tending to the park was his most significant work of his life. He acquired it to preserve it as a tribute to the missionaries, soldiers, sailors, priests, and artisans who settled on the hill in 1769. In 1929, he donated it to the city. On January 20th, 1908, Marston and others filed the Mission Hills subdivision map. The new subdivision reflected Nolan's suggestion that San Diego embrace its romantic history. The name Mission Hills set it apart from other subdivisions, which often named their location for their developers. The location was just up the hill from San Diego Presidio Park, the Plymouth Rock of the West, and San Diego Mission de Alcala, known as the birthplace of California. This subdivision map was filed a year before the announcement of the Panama, California Exposition. The community of Mission Hills today combines about 50 small subdivisions, including one called Presidio Hills. Meanwhile, Harry Miller, Sarah's son, recruited real estate development team, and they followed Marston's lead. They changed the name of Johnston Heights to Inspiration Heights and Johnston Street to Sunset Boulevard. The bottom image is an artistic rendering of the Villa Orizaba by Virginia Goodrich for the 1909 Inspiration Heights promotional brochure. And the top is the letterhead for that company. Then Harry's team built 4 model homes along Sunset Boulevard. 3 of the original 4 iconic Inspiration Heights street markers remain today along Sunset Boulevard. L. Eugene Fuller listed himself as a carpenter in the city directory. He and his wife Caroline built one of the earliest houses in Mission Hills between 1908 and 1909. The Fullers bought 2 lots on a handshake deal for $2,000, and once the house was built, ran a real estate office out of the Dutch colonial, quote, cream-colored house, close quote. Eugene was also a member of the Wobblies, a radical industrial workers of the world. In 1910, Judge Casey, who was later fined $150 for drinking during Prohibition, built this now lost house over 2 large lots on Sheridan Avenue. His widow sold the house in 1920. Around 1939, Dwight D. Stanford, who happened to be one of Allen's history professors at San Diego State, bought the house, resplit the lots, demolished it, and built 2 modern houses there. At the edge of Inspiration Heights, Arthur Molan built this house at the corner of Sunset Boulevard and St. James Place. St. James was once named Howard Street for the first owner, an attorney named Hamilton Gay Howard, who was the son of a senator, Jacob Howard. The street was later renamed St. James Place. Look at the stylized motif, almost like a McDonald's arch, but half of it, and redwood pergola and shingles. They've all been removed or covered. A later resident was related to Ulysses S. Grant. A great loss to Mission Hills is the Milo C. Treat Mission Revival House by local builder Edward Rambo. Treat was an oil and gas operator who spent $40,000 to build the house. During the war years, when U.S. troops occupied Balboa Park for training, the mansion was donated to the San Diego Fine Arts Society, which housed its collection there. In the early 1950s, the house was demolished and 3 houses took its place. 2 of the newer houses were designed by modern masters Homer Dalloway and Lord Ruocco. In 1913, master architect Walter Keller designed this colonial revival house at the corner of Sunset and Alameda Drive. In 1960, Keller left San Diego and in 1918 tragically died in France as a casualty of the Great War. The first owner was A.J. Morgenstern. He was a top criminal defense attorney, but then was later convicted for passing bad checks to cover gambling debts. The house is also named for Ralph Janey, who practiced law in San Diego. In 1937, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt nominated Jenny to the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of California. This 1913 bungalow on Hermosa Way was first owned by the Stimson family, who had only lived here for about 3 years. Fortunately, we have a photo to share from this family because our friend Eric Hansen found their photo album and he knew we would be interested in it. Overgrown plants cover the porch, but you still see the shiplap siding topped by vertical shingles above the string course, which is typical of arts and crafts bungalows of this time period. We have some interesting aerial shots of the neighborhood, and one is the centerfold of the book. It shows several significant houses at the west end of Sunset Boulevard. The 1921 Italian Renaissance Guyman House that we'll see later up close. Then across the street, Guyman's tennis courts. Next to the guest house, or the quarters, the servants' quarters, and the carriage house is the bishop's house. And then next to that is the Villa Orizaba. Across the street is the Milo C. Treat house. And then down in the corner is the Bertha Mitchell House, a Spanish revival designed by architects Parkinson and Parkinson, who also designed LA's Union Station. In 1918, William Templeton Johnson designed the Spanish revival house for his family located at the north end of Trias Street, overlooking Mission Valley. Johnson studied at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. Johnson was invited to San Diego by Bertram Goodhue. Besides other significant houses, he also designed the Francis Parker School and the Serra Museum in Presidio Park. Speaking of schools, Mission Hills is home to 3 of them. In 1912, Francis Parker School began in a bungalow on Randolph Street and Fort Stockton Drive. You'll hear this over and over in different contexts. The photo at the bottom shows moving day. Clara Sturgis Johnson and her niece had attended Francis Parker School in Chicago and believed that the curriculum provided the modern educational lessons in civic betterment that they sought for their own children. So they founded the school here. In 1913, Francis Parker School moved into the school building that it occupies today on Randolph Street. This photo shows a 1918 kindergarten classroom where it appears that students are actually constructing their own desks. Students were taught manual arts, including weaving, basketry, and woodwork. Shouldn't all children's classrooms be appointed with tile fireplaces, beautiful artwork, and windows for air and light? In 1914, Grant Elementary School opened. It was named after the Civil War general and President Ulysses S. Grant. In the 1890s, President Grant's sons, U.S. Grant Jr. and Jesse Grant, lived in San Diego and held important civic and business roles here. This beautiful school lost its Spanish Revival architectural details after World War II. In 1973, it was demolished and replaced following a statewide earthquake scare that resulted in demolition of many beautiful schools. This May 1954 photograph shows the area around Grant Elementary School. Washington Street is up at the top third, and Washington Place down at the bottom third. Calvary Cemetery is to the right, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And the U-shaped school is in the center, with the bungalows to the left of it. All had been demolished for school expansion. There are 3 churches in Mission Hills. On January 29, 1911, the Mission Hills Congregational Church held its first services in a small bungalow. 28 people attended, listening to Reverend Thorpe while they sat on planks and boxes. That summer, a redwood board and batten church was constructed by master architect Emmerbrook Weaver at Jackdaw Street and Fort Stockton Drive, where lemon and olive groves once stood. Here is the interior of the 1911 church built by Emmerbrook Weaver. The 12-inch redwood boards were rough on the outside and beautifully finished on the interior. Reverend John Doan of Greeley, Colorado was its first minister. Reverend Doan commissioned Weaver to build a redwood bungalow for their family on nearby Linden Road. In 1915, the congregation was outgrowing its small redwood church. Lewis Gill, the nephew of Irvin Gill, was selected as the new architect. Church members were hesitant to give up the redwood house of worship they had built. So Lewis Gill reluctantly designed a church that would help the congregation come around by emulating a style that fit the neighborhood. The new church was completed in 1921. In 1913, 4 lots were purchased to build the Methodist Church at the corner of Getty, which is today's Fort Stockton Drive, and Hooker, today's Lark Street. It was designed by architect William E. Gibb. The bottom photo shows that the church was constructed of hollow clay tile supplied by Forrest Hyatt, Hyatt's brick company, and Hyatt lived several blocks away on Sheridan Avenue. The top right photo dates to 1918 and shows the first minister and his wife, who left to be missionaries in 1923. The bottom right photo shows the finished stucco exterior. The church has opulent stained glass windows by Judson Art Glass. For those who may not be aware, Judson is still located in Pasadena. It's comparable to Tiffany for its quality work. William H. Judson was a plein air artist, studied William Morris, and a key member of the Arroyo Guild in Los Angeles, and was a Methodist. In 1914, the church paid $750 for stained glass windows, which would be $23,000 today. Still a bargain. On April 25th, 1910, St. Vincent's celebrated its first Mass after the Los Angeles Bishop Thomas purchased 3 bungalows at the corner of Fort Stockton Drive and Hawk Street. In 1918, the Mission Revival Church shown here replaced a smaller wood frame building. It was described as having a dark wood interior, stained glass, and a freestanding wooden bell tower that you can see in this back corner. In 1968, the church was demolished. The 1968 design was demolished in 2010 for a modern style church that still stands today. Somehow we still hear bells on Sunday. For those counting, St. Vincent's also operates the 3rd school. As shown earlier, Grant School was located next to Calvary Cemetery. It's one of San Diego's oldest cemeteries and was in use starting in 1875 until the last burial in 1960. Photos were taken just before the gravestones were removed, and the cemetery was converted into Calvary Pioneer Memorial Park. Yes, the bodies are still there. Among those buried were the rich and famous for their day. For example, the former governor of Tijuana and sub-prefect, Jose Maria Larroque, who fought in the 1911 Battle of Tijuana. Also a survivor of the Battle of Little Bighorn, an official who helped plan President Lincoln's 1861 secret route into Washington, D.C., and about 250 babies from the 1918 pandemic. The remains of Civil War veterans, Old Town pioneers, paupers, or those unknown were buried in what was called Potter's Field. In 1970, the cemetery was designated as Historic Site Number 5. Then the gravestones were cleared away to convert it into a park. Many were unceremoniously destroyed. This is Alan's rendering showing locations of some of the gravestones to match up with the gravestones that were retained within the park, but relocated near Grant School by an old adobe wall in what was Potter's Field. The arrows at the top, referring to the eucalyptus trees, were reportedly planted by Kate Sessions to show a separation for Protestants and Catholics, though there were no Protestants buried here. Nuns and priests were buried here too, and one of the most popular of the day was Father Antonio Ubac. He arrived here in 1866 from Spain and was known to be a powerful, colorful, and caring person who was concerned about indigenous rights and civic affairs. He was in charge of the Catholic parish until his death in 1907 and known as the last of the Padres. He was believed to be the inspiration of Father Gaspara in Helen Hunt Jackson's novel Ramona. His funeral attracted over 2,000 people, and a line of carriages over a mile and a half long followed the funeral procession from St. Joseph's Cathedral to Calvary Cemetery. He is buried near the main entrance beside about a dozen other priests under an old pepper tree. Now the grave site is in the parking lot as shown. Family life gets to the heart of the community. Many wonderful early San Diego families lived in Mission Hills, such as the Norquists shown here. Leslie Gordon and Lillian Norquist were on their honeymoon from Minnesota when they arrived in San Diego, and they never went back. They are shown here with their family on West Lewis Street and their bunny named Bunsy. People would drive up on the weekends just to play with the bunny. Modernist architect John August Reed grew up in Mission Hills. He's pictured here at age 10 between his parents in their home on Altamira Place. Brothers Oral Philip Jr. and David are seated in front. In 1945, at age 16, John joined the military. After the war, he studied at USC's architectural school. He assisted Lloyd Rocco in the late 40s, later working for Lloyd Wright and Sim Bruce Richards. John was an early advocate for Irving Gill. And that's John and I 21 years ago during a SOHO event. This 1940s photograph shows Jane Irons Guyman with their daughters Janette and Anne at their backyard fountain with matching outfits. Jane was born in San Pedro, married Rusty Irons, and later Edward Guyman Jr., who went by Ned. During World War II, Jane was a Red Cross volunteer at Balboa Naval Hospital. She hosted many pool parties for cast members of the Old Globe and for neighborhood children. In the 1950s, the Baker family is excited by the gifts they received one Christmas morning. The children are Betty and George Jr. and parents Virginia and George Sr. The family lived on Washington Place. Their Christmas card this year read, "On Dancer, on Prancer, on Gettin', on Givin'. This is what we Bakers call livin'. We sure have a lot of Realwood folks to remember us California blokes." We have a chapter devoted to the photos of children, showing how they played and dressed way before hoodies and video games. In 1913, Bert and Mary Stimson arrived in San Diego. Bert was a bank manager. In 1914, their daughter Mary Louise was 4 and had a birthday party with 8 of her friends. They played games on the lawn before entering the bungalow's dining room, which had dainty refreshments, pink ribbons attached to the sashes of tiny Kewpie dolls at each place setting and connected to the birthday cake. Mary Louise later became a well-known florist. This is a 1950s photograph of Nita and Dale Clark. Dale is on the end of the diving board. They're enjoying a swim with their friends just after their unheated pool was installed at their parents' Spanish Revival home on Randolph Street. Their parents were Mary Hollis and James Dallas Clark. Both parents were involved with the San Diego Natural History Museum, the Old Globe, and the San Diego Trust and Savings Bank, which was established in 1889 by Dale's great-grandfather, J.W. Sefton. This is a 1949 photograph of David Hicks' birthday costume party along the 4000 block of Lark Street. Halloween is still a big deal in Mission Hills. Costumes of the era include goblins, ghosts, cowboys, and animals. Do you remember making your own Halloween costumes or buying them at the drugstore? Businesses and artists are well represented in the book, including the Ace Drug Store at the corner of Goldfinch and Washington Streets. There, one got a prescription filled, had a root beer float, got the latest cosmetics, mailed a postcard, and checked out a library book. People filled up their gas tank around the corner at the Nooner Pump at Hawk and Fort Stockton. Below is singer Hope Marqueux Byron, a nationally known singer who had studied in New York and Paris and lived on Hermosa Way. Kate Sessions' nursery growing grounds, office and sales yard were at the corner of West Lewis and Stevens Streets, where Mission Hills Liquor currently stands. In 1924, Sessions sold her nursery to Giuseppe and Pasquale Anticelli. They renamed it Mission Hills Nursery, replanting it a block away on Fort Stockton Drive, its current location. Luther Powers was born in 1868 in West Virginia. In 1914, he found his way to San Diego and founded L.B. Powers Plumbing downtown. In 1917, he moved his shop to Mission Hills. And then in 1923, one block west, he had Martin V. Melhorn build the Spanish Revival shop and garage. That same year, Calvin Powers, seen at the left in his San Diego Rowing Club uniform, became his dad's partner. Ellen and I were the 5th owners of the oldest plumbing shop in San Diego. In 2014, we celebrated its 100th anniversary with a big street fair and also had a vote at the event for the image of the cover of our book. And this is what won. We retired in 2021, and yes, I still miss it. In 1935, the Nooner Brothers Ford dealership and gas station debuted at 1011 Fort Stockton Drive. It was modeled after Balboa Park's Ford building, an Art Deco design built for the 1935 California Pacific International Exposition. This dedication publicity photo shows several men in suits ready to start pumping gas. Note the caged lion in the background on the right. The Nooner Brothers station was recently demolished and rebuilt as a high-end restaurant with mid-rise apartments behind it. Note the very cool Lincoln Zephyr V12 Auto in the night photo at the bottom. In 1936, the Nooner Brothers girls softball team played the Southern California Championship Tournament after beating Brown Motors before 3,500 people. No doubt Brown Motors sold Chevys. This 1947 photograph shows a salty sailor and his attractive first mate in front of Ford's Market on West Lewis Street. You could buy meats, vegetables, Coca-Cola, and cigarettes there. A well-balanced diet. The market was later demolished for a church preschool parking lot. The photo from the left is about 1942 at the intersection of Fort Stockton Drive and Ibis Street. R.W. Caldwell owned the gas station and tire store at the corner. He was the self-proclaimed mayor of Mission Hills who gave away 50-cent tokens, as shown. The two-story arts and crafts home in the middle, on the corner of the street actually, was built by master builder Harry Bronner and was demolished for today's Art Deco Ibis Market sometime in the 40s. Many artists lived in Mission Hills in the 1920s. Eloise Rohrbeck, a well-known writer and editor for Gustav Stickley's The Craftsman magazine, lived on Sunset Boulevard. Eloise designed at least 15 Craftsman magazine covers and was an early champion for Irving Gill. After working as an editor at Touchdown magazine, Eloise moved to San Diego to be near her sister, Grace Hay, and her dear niece, Jean. Grace Hay was the niece of John Hay, the former Secretary of State under President William McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt, and was President Lincoln's secretary. The Hay family lived in the large Craftsman at Fort Stockton Drive and Trias Street. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the definition of a rabbit hole. This rare tile is the last known remnant from the former hillside colony. Anne MacDonald Steffes bought a barracks and recreation room and moved them to Trias Street after World War I. Over the next 2 decades, she added to the hillside colony with several small wood-shingled cottages. This was home to artists, musicians, writers, and students under the directions of Steffes and writer Emma Lindsay Squire. Beginning with the 1915 exposition, artists and writers met at Bertha Bliss Taylor's White Bungalow to have children's literature classes, travel talks, Shakespeare birthday parties, Arbor Day celebrations with the planting of a Torrey pines, and talk by the daughter-in-law of the botanist who discovered it. George Wharton James delivered a lecture in 1917 at the White Bungalow titled God's Message of the Open Air. James was an advocate for outdoor nudity. He was also a popular author, lecturer, journalist, and editor of the Craftsman and Out West magazines. The 1909 John Vance Cheney, Alice Barrett Stevenson Arts and Crafts House was built by Emmerbrick Weaver. Cheney was a nationally known poet, essayist, and librarian. Weaver was one of a handful of architects who elevated the California bungalow to a high art form. He worked for Hubbard and Gill and also for William Templeton Johnson. A later resident at 1816 Sheridan Avenue was the famous singer and composer Alice Barrett Stevenson. She's pictured in the center of the photograph at the left. She married Samuel Price and then in 1926 married Dr. George Roy Stevenson. In 1927, she founded the San Diego Symphony Orchestra at her Sheridan Avenue home, which is also the gathering spot for locally and nationally known singers, composers, and musicians. In 1912, Orlando Giannini, most known for his association with Frank Lloyd Wright, built a bungalow on Alameda Drive. His Prairie School planters still can be viewed today. Orlando painted famous murals in Wright's Oak Park home, seen at the top right. He designed glass mosaic fireplaces and Tico glass lampshades, such as the one at the lower right. This shade alone sold for over $15,000 at a recent Toomey auction. In 1939, upon her retirement, Clara Barak Wells moved to Mission Hills. Clara founded Kalo, one of the leading arts and crafts silversmith shops in America. She lived in this 1912 William Templeton Johnson designed Italian Renaissance house until her death in 1965. Kalo objects were known for purity and simplicity, exhibiting clean lines, restrained ornament, and superb hand craftsmanship. She gave lectures on silver throughout the 40s and 50s when San Diego was a nationally known hotbed for post-war modernism jewelry. Belle Baranchow, one of San Diego's best-known artists, lived at 1010 West Lewis Street from 1962 until 1980. She was born in 1902 in Chicago, studied at the Minnesota School of Art and the Art Institute of Chicago. In 1933, she arrived in San Diego. To support herself during the Depression, she began a long career in education, first teaching in Chicago's Jewish community and locally at Francis Parker School from 1946 until 1969. While Mission Hills is home to 3 schools, one might add a 4th school, the Prairie School of Frank Lloyd Wright and Company. Mission Hills is home to over 50 Prairie School designs, more than any other community west of Chicago. Prairie School houses are characterized by their flat or low-hipped roofs, stucco exterior, horizontal string course, bands of casement windows, and wide overhanging eaves, all which emphasize the flat prairie landscape of the Midwest. Never mind that San Diego has hills, mountains, and an ocean. On the left is the 1960 Joel Brown House, perhaps the purest Prairie School design in Mission Hills. In 1923, the 1923 Prairie School house on the right was built by Martin V. Melhorn and might be the last example of the most indigenous American architecture locally. The Prairie School designs in Mission Hills can best be considered as regional interpretations of the Midwest genre. While these 2 houses exhibit the typical characteristics found in Prairie School designs, the use of corner brackets is uncommon in the Prairie School aesthetic. The 1913 Mark Schoenbrunn residence at 4106 Alameda Drive was designed by the little-known architect Earl Joseph Brunk. Schoenbrunn was a retired department store merchant from Kansas. The large Prairie School design features 2 nearly symmetrical wings, wide overhanging eaves with massive steeped roof brackets and casement windows. This is one of only 3 known Brink-built designs in San Diego. Tragically, the promising architect died at a young age. Nathan Rugden built this 1919 Prairie School residence. Architectural differences from Frank Lloyd Wright and Associates include the rectangular shape, corner brackets, and exterior chimney. The Midwest architects regarded decorative brackets under the gables as obscene hangovers from the Victorian era, but the West proved to be less uptight about that. We just had to be different. One of the tenets of Prairie School design is Gesamtkunstwerk, which translates to total work of art, a creative process where the entire design, including the furniture, is a cohesive whole. However, Mission Hills Prairie School designs can be called nicht Gesamtkunstwerk, or not total work of art. The interior bears little relationship to the outside and reflects an arts and crafts aesthetic, not Prairie School. But notice the beautiful Gruby fireplace tiles, the gumwood trim, the Stickley Brothers furniture, as well as a desk lamp plugged into the light fixture above. This is likely where one could have a conversation dangling. What could have been. In March 1911, Irving Gill was commissioned to design a cottage for Marion Olmsted of the famous American Landscaping Company led by Frederick Law Olmsted. In May 1916, this cubic modern design was featured prominently in Gustav Stickley's The Craftsman magazine. Marion wanted to be near her brothers as they planned Balboa Park. However, when that fell through, the Olmsteds all went home to Boston, and this radical cottage was sadly never built. A year later, William Templeton Johnson built the Francis Parker School at the site. Del Harris, previously a draftsman for Charles and Henry Green, designed this 1912's arts and crafts house with Norwegian dormer features, likely a nod to the first owner, Thomas Reining. Reining was born in Norway, was a frontiersman and Indian fighter, captain of the Arizona Rangers, a member of the Spanish-American War Rough Riders, friends with Teddy Roosevelt, a member of Buffalo Bill's troupe at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, and was present at the capture of Geronimo. His biography, Gun Notches, was the inspiration for a 50s TV's Western series called 26 Men. Reining was the original Forrest Gump. This is a photo of Ada McGrew and her Buick in front of her home. The stucco bungalow was built in 1919 by master builder Morris B. Irvin. Irvin was responsible for 133 houses in Mission Hills. Ada McGrew was born in Canada, moving to San Diego in the early 20s. She owned Deluxe Cleaners downtown. She was also a listed plein air artist who exhibited at many local shows. This is a rendering of Frank Mead and Richard Rikra's designed 1916 Mission Revival home for Robert and Belle Gamal. Before their 8-year partnership, Mead and Rikra had worked in Irving Gill's office. The house was built of hollow clay tile and stucco. The living room has 16-foot windows admitting an abundance of light and air. Mead and Rikra expressed their interest in North African, Spanish, and Mediterranean styles with this design as demonstrated by the wooden spindles covering the arched door, red roof tiles, and massive sculptural brackets. Gamel was from Salt Lake City, where he was the general manager of a Utah copper company. This is an early photo of the 1921 Guyman House, designed by LA architect Robert Raymond, before the massive stone fence was built surrounding the property. Ned Guyman Jr. was a well-known collector of first edition mystery novels. At one time, he had over 20,000 books in his library, including first editions by Edgar Allan Poe and Dashiell Hammett. This 1923 photograph shows the drawing room inside the Guyman house. Besides the opulent furnishings, notice the large tile fireplace, likely Batchelder, and the tapestry above it. The image at the lower left is Ned Guyman's 1935 California Pacific International Expo pass. This Spanish Revival house was designed by architect William Templeton Johnson and built by master builder Walter Trepti. Trepti lived here until 1952, when noted architect Sam Hamill and his wife Georgette moved in. The Hamills resided here until 1990. The back of the home shows a pergola and Moorish arches over the balcony. In 1929, sisters Mary and Julia Pickett designed a courtyard community of 3 English cottages on Jackdaw Street. They were both school teachers. Their historically designated cottage is seen in the bottom right photo, just to the left of the Zeppelin. The English cottages were built by Swedish builder Gunnar E. Johnson. The photo at the left features Sarita Madsen and her mother in the 1950s in front of their home. This 1924 Spanish Revival house on Sunset Boulevard was built by Morris B. Irvin. The first resident was Mariano Escobedo, a businessman who owned the popular Highlight Palace in Tijuana. The beautiful tile depicts a peasant woman gathering water and is based upon an 1875 oil painting by Leon Bonat, Roman Girl at a Fountain, now part of the collection of the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art. Here are early photographs of the Pueblo Revival House, built at the edge of a canyon in 1926 by Frank O. Wells for Harold Starkey. A period article called it, quote, a replica of the homes of the ancient cliff dwellers of New Mexico, close quote. Wells worked in interior design art department of the West Coast studios of the famous Players Lasky Company, which merged with Paramount in 1927. There are about 5 Cliff May homes in the Presidio Hills section of Mission Hills, including the 1936 Lorraine and Harold Tuckler house, shown here. In the SOHO Cliff May home tour booklet, Anne Jarmusch writes, quote, "This highly creative May paid attention to every detail to support the illusion of domestic life in old California," close quote. May designed D&M tiled doorknobs for his 1930s haciendas. John Lloyd Wright designed the 1949 Mooney House. The modernism home used redwood as the interior wood and recalls the Usonian houses Wright's father designed from the 1930s through the 1950s. Note the low-hipped roof line with overhanging eaves. The wood ornament zigzag chain pattern on the roof fascia was reportedly created from leftover scraps of wood during construction. Jin Wang's 1964 modernism design, built for his son-in-law, has a low-hipped terraced roof, wide overhanging eaves, and banks of 11 glass sliding windows. Wang was famous for the LAX 60s space age terminal that inspired TV's Jetsons. We started with an 1887 Victorian home and reached into the space age. Our book closes with a homage to the boyhood home of Senator James Mills. He grew up in this neighborhood, in this tapestry brick bungalow alongside the streetcar tracks. Mills was elected to the California State Senate in 1970, and in 1972 sponsored the Mills Act. The Mills Act is arguably the most important economic incentive for historic preservation. It provides tax relief for owners of qualified historic properties in California who actively participate in their restoration and maintenance. We're grateful to our local preservation hero, the late Senator James Mills, for the good work that he's done on behalf of his hometown and the state. At present, Mission Hills has 4 historic districts. Historic districts better protect the overall cohesiveness, uniqueness, and architectural integrity of a historic community. We think James Mills had something to do with it. We're grateful to all the people who generously donated their photographs and stories to be included in the book. And that's not all. Thank you for your attention and your interest. Alan and I enjoyed learning, living, advocating, and loving Mission Hills for 25 years. We're grateful to SOHO for their support through the years and for sharing us, and letting us share our presentation with you today. I'll turn off the screen now and be available for questions if time's permitting. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Janet. That was a great presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure everybody else did too. Let's get to the questions. You mentioned several key figures who helped shape Mission Hills. Was there one whose influence surprised you the most when researching the history?
I already knew about George Marston and somewhat knew about Sarah Johnson Cox Miller, so I guess I would have to say Kate Sessions, and mostly because of just the grit that she had in trying to get the streetcar in front of her nursery. That was her big goal, is she wanted the streetcar from downtown to come to Mission Hills because she wanted to bring customers to her nursery. But she went door to door and she recruited Alice Rainford, and they went door to door to collect all these signatures to get people to commit to widening the road so that they could get the streetcar there. So I guess she was the most, I didn't realize all of that effort that she put into it. However, I did know that her aesthetic was involved, and that was also exciting.
excuse me, George Marston's city plan by John Nolan, who you touched on briefly, was never adopted, but Mission Hill seems to reflect some of its ideals. What elements of Nolan's vision can still be seen in the neighborhood today?
So the most obvious thing is when you look at the map. I can pull that back up for you if you'd like, but if you look at the map, the street lines are all in a line, and then all of a sudden it gets to Mission Hills and they're all zigzaggy because they go along the top of the canyon tops. And what that allowed for is allowed big houses to be near little houses and created a diversity in what ended up being built there. So that really, I think, was the most lingering influence, beside the fact that he wanted to name it Mission Hills instead of just, Marston's subdivision, which we have one of those now too.
This one says, I used to live at the home at the corner of Fort Stockton and West Lewis, which had a third story in 1974. I believe third-story homes were not allowed at a certain time. Do you know anything about that?
There were height limits. It was a 30-foot height limit in San Diego, in Mission Hills. And I know some of the people that were advocating for that. And that actually happened when, if you know the area, there's a Green Manor building, which exceeds the 30-foot height limit. And that inspired residents to put in the 30-foot height limit for Mission Hills that lasted for a very long time. So it could be that it was being built during that time period. I don't know what your years were, but that is probably when, it was probably after the 30-foot height limit was imposed.
We're being asked what happened to Gaiman's mystery book collection. I don't think you'd actually know that. I have an interesting notation on that. Gaiman also owned the Derby Pendleton House in Old Town back in the 1930s. And I believe he had his collection there at one time.
Okay. There was an article in the newspaper we found about his collection and how it was distributed or where he donated it. I'm not exactly sure.
Why didn't you show anything designed by Irving Gill?
Okay. I had one image or rendering that for Marion Olmsted that was designed by Irving Gill, but he never actually built anything here. His nephew, Louis Gill, lived in a house on Trias Street, but I don't think Louis Gill designed that house. Louis Gill did work on the Congregational Church, which is now the United Church of Christ. But we don't have any Irving Gills in Mission Hills. We have a lot of great architects and builders, but we saved Irving Gill for Bankers Hill and for other areas of the community instead of Mission Hills.
Are there any hidden details like old streetcar tracks, unusual plantings, or early street lamps that people might walk past today without realizing their historical significance?
Yes. We had a biking tour for SOHO at one time, and we rode past some of these. As far as the streetcar tracks, they are buried under the concrete. But guess what? I don't know, 10 years ago, they were working on West Lewis Street, and an ambitious person got the workers to give him a huge chunk of rail track. And so what did he do? He came into Powers and said, "This is too big. Can you guys cut it for me?" And my smart husband said, "I can if you give me half." So we cut it in half. It's so heavy. Our piece is this big, and I don't know what to do with it, but it is a remnant of that rail car that is just buried under the rail that is buried under the concrete. There is an old light fixture that I know of and there's also a horse hitch that's within the Mission Hills Historic District. The old light fixture, though, is trying to remember what street it's on. I want to say Valley Vista, maybe, but I'm not positive. So if SOHO does that bike tour again, I'll be sure to show you.
All right. With all the skilled artisans and builders that came for the boom years, are there any specific homes or blocks in Mission Hills that especially stand out for their craftsmanship or design integrity?
There are a lot of great homes, and most of the really good ones they're just speckled all over. So it's not hard to find them, and to focus in on one area is almost impossible. But at one point, Alan and I had a walking tour, and we would highlight some of the ones that were extraordinary. But honestly, what I would say is take a walk. Just take a walk, come into the neighborhood, stop by, have a cup of coffee, be ready to go, and enjoy the neighborhood, and enjoy the trees in the neighborhood, and enjoy the walkability, and watch the sidewalks because they're not so great. But it's a wonderful place to just explore and relax by looking at all the beauty around it. And the gardens, right now there's a garden walk today, and the gardens look really pretty right now because we had a little bit of rain.
Great. And, you mentioned the Mills Act program as an incentive to offset maintenance expenses for historically designated properties. And it's been in the news a lot lately. Is the city going to get rid of this incentive program?
They want to. They're implementing something called preservation in progress, and the building industry is all behind them, trying to streamline the progress so that basically they can have every single house and just demolish it. And so what historic does, when something's historically designated, it slows that down. It might not be conducive to the fast pace that a builder wants to do, to tear something down and rebuild. So we really need help right now in order to preserve the Mills Act. It really is a benefit to the city. It's a small investment that keeps neighborhoods looking good. I was just remembering one of my old-time friends. Her name is Betty. She bought her house here in 1963, and she has a beautiful Spanish Revival house, and it's been historically designated. She's elderly now, so that really helps her have certainty in her really golden years. But when she first moved here, she said it really wasn't that nice. People weren't taking care of the houses here. And so now we have the benefit of all the beautiful houses that have been restored and maintained. But that's because over years and years of time. And the Mills Act just provides an incentive that allows that to still happen. And what happens? The property values are higher, there's less crime, people have pride in San Diego and in their neighborhoods. And San Diego's a city of neighborhoods. So the city's efforts to try to streamline historic and to reduce the Mills Act, it really doesn't make any sense, but we really need everybody to tell the city council to keep it. There's nothing bad that happens by having the Mills Act. It's just an investment in our city that pays off over and over again. So there's a lot to talk about, but really I have to say, if you're not a member of SOHO, you need to join. And if you are a member of SOHO, you need to read the new newsletter that just came out, the May-June newsletter. It's about a couple week, maybe a week old. There's an article in there that explains it, but write a postcard, call your city council person. It's important that we keep this program.
Okay, well, thank you, Janet, for that illuminating presentation. We're so grateful for all you've done to preserve San Diego's heritage and for sharing your insights with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us for this edition of Penning the Past. Past presentations are available to view or revisit on the SOHO San Diego YouTube channel. We'll hope you'll join us again next month as we continue exploring the people, places, and events that have shaped our region's past. Our June 14th lecture, San Diego Trolleys, will be presented by Douglas W. Mengers, a San Diego-based historian and archaeologist with a passion for uncovering the stories behind Southern California's growth and infrastructure. And before we go, we invite you to mark your calendars for another exciting upcoming Zoom lecture on Saturday, May 31st at 11 a.m. Dynamic architectural historian and preservationist Diane Kane will present Adaptive Reuse, a smart housing strategy for San Diego. In celebration of Historic Preservation Month, Diane will show how repurposing older buildings, offices, warehouse, and commercial spaces can help meet our region's urgent housing and climate needs while preserving community character and history. It's a timely and vital conversation you won't want to miss. Visit sohosandiego.org to register for this free presentation. And thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at our upcoming events. Thanks again, Janet. That was a great presentation.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, SOHO. You have a wonderful day today.
You too. Thank you, everybody.